Good evening all and welcome. Tonight's video features 4 truly terrifying creepypasta type stories. Before you jump ship, let me tell you, not only are these stories exceptionally good and creepy, we also have the pleasure of being joined by horror sensation Dr. Creepin. So be sure to stick around to the end. In any case, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. My grandfather is 95 years old, and not too long for this world. There's nothing but a mess of tubes and wires to tether him here with us. It's difficult for him to speak, but each rasping whisper carries a severe weight that cannot be interrupted. My family doesn't talk about things like death, though. So whenever I visit my dad, we tend to spend most of the time sitting in near silence. "What a news week, huh?" my dad might say. My grandfather will let out a grunt. "Crazy world." Then silence again. Small talk seems almost disrespectful in the gravity of the situation, but no one wants to be the first to breach the irrevocable goodbye. When the silence gets too loud, my dad will start to fidget with his phone or pull out a book until one of us can make an excuse to leave. That's how it went yesterday. With my father, mumbling something about a dentist appointment and hurrying out the door almost as soon as we arrived. "You'll stay though, won't you?" my grandfather said when we were alone in the room together. "You'll listen to an old man's last secret." This was it then. The end of the road was in sight. "Would you like me to call Dad back?" I asked. Grandfather shook his head, as far as the oxygen tubes would allow it to do so. "I'd rather he didn't know." I already knew some of the story he told me. It began when my grandfather was 20 years old, living in Nazi Germany. He'd been working forced labor on a farm, but managed to smuggle my grandmother and infant father out of the country, hidden in a grain shipment. He'd been caught almost immediately and sent to the concentration camp at Buchenwald, where he endured the next 2 years until he was liberated by Allied forces. "You don't have to tell me what happened there if you don't want to," I told him. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the gruesome details. He was unusually animated and persistent though, promising it was something that needed to be said. He wouldn't have survived the ordeal if it hadn't been for a friend he'd met there. One of the Nazi officers, a Rottenführer squad leader, had taken a special interest in him because of their striking similarity in age and appearance. The two would sit on either side of a barbed wire fence and swap stories about their childhoods. My grandfather would talk about my grandmother, how beautiful she was, and how he wouldn't give up until he found her again. The SS officer had gone straight from the Hitler Youth Group to the army and had never been intimate with a woman. He became enraptured in my grandfather's tales of romance, and the two became close friends despite the circumstances. The officers twice spared my grandfather's name from work assignments that meant certain death, and he'd often slip extra rations through the fence, which my grandfather would then distribute to the other prisoners. It wasn't a good life, but it was a life, and that was good, grandfather said. Things changed as the war began drawing to a close. The Nazi officers became increasingly paranoid and desperate as the Allied forces moved in. It became common practice for lower-ranking officers to be held as scapegoats when impossible work orders were not met. Besides that, the rumor that the Rottenführer was protecting my grandfather put him in a dire position with his own officers. Faced between protecting my grandfather and his own hide, the Rottenführer signed the order for my grandfather to be sent to a nearby armament factory. 18-hour workdays, starvation rations, and no medical attention. The factory might as well have been a death sentence. The 3-month survival rate was less than 50%. In the name of love, my grandfather pleaded. Let him survive to find her again. She was waiting for him in America. The Rottenführer was moved, but his decision was final. His only compromise was to record the address of where she went and send her a letter to know what had happened to him. So how did you survive? I asked. Did he change his mind? Were you rescued from the factory? Shielded from the worst of the camp by the Rottenführer, the transition to the factory proved too difficult for the young farmer. He didn't last the first week. What do you mean, didn't last? How'd you get out? The exertion of the story was taking its toll on my grandfather. He coughed and wheezed, struggling to draw breath for several seconds before clearing his throat a final time. On April 11th, 1945, the Buchenwald camp was liberated. Many of the Nazis had already abandoned their positions and fled the country. Others decided to lock themselves inside, pretending to be prisoners themselves, so the Allied forces would have mercy on them. This was especially convincing for those who had taken the time to get to know the prisoners and could assume their identities. When the SS officers gave the information and addresses of his lost love, he was allowed to board the next transit ship returning to America to be reunited with her. The gears in my head were turning, and then they stopped. Your grandmother was suspicious at first when I met her, but she accepted that the war had changed me. Besides, I knew so many stories about her that she couldn't deny our shared history. I raised his boy as my own and lived the life he dreamed of every night until his death. Do you think your real grandfather would forgive me if he knew? I didn't have an answer for him then, and I didn't get another chance. He died in his sleep that night after a long and happy life that wasn't his.
To the landlord. The stove is broken again, and demonic hauntings are unacceptable. The following maintenance requests and complaints were found on the computer of one Mrs. Doris May, the landlord of the apartment building at 2618 Wayne Boulevard, following the thorough search of the building by the police. Donald Fitzgerald, Unit 411. January 13th. My wife and I moved here for the proximity to the subway and for the cheap rents, but we did not move here so we wouldn't have a working stove. I do not plan on eating takeout for the remainder of my tenure at this building. I demand maintenance come down at once and fix this. Unacceptable. January 24th. And now the refrigerator isn't working. The refrigerator temperature should be at a nice, cool 34 degrees Fahrenheit, but try as we might, Patricia and I have been unable to get it below 36 degrees. And so our milk is spoiled. The cheese is molded, my yogurt is inedible, and my beers are not chilled the way I'd like when I get home from a long day at work. Once again, I demand a maintenance representative to be here tomorrow to fix this. And not the same man as last time. Jose was rude and didn't apologize for all this inconvenience when we yelled at him. February 8th. It seems we can't go a single day without finding something unacceptable about this building. At night time, both Patricia and I hear a faint but constant thumping in the walls. What is that? I demand to know why we cannot get some peace and quiet. February 12th. If our Wi-Fi drops out in the middle of Patricia's stories one more time, there'll be hell to pay. Get the ISP down here now to increase our speeds. This is insane. February 18th. It appears my previous demand went unheeded. Last night the thumping was far worse. Sounds like a ghost is living in the walls. Patricia hates ghosts. They are rude and uninvited and do nasty things like slam doors and break china dishes. Get a job, ghosts. Patricia can't sleep in these conditions, and I hereby demand an exorcist be brought to the premises to deal with this at once. At once. February 27th. The refrigerator is acting up again. I thought this was fixed. The expiration date on my milk says used by March 3rd, but it's not March 3rd yet, and already my milk is starting to smell. The temperature's 36 degrees and rising. Unacceptable. March 4th. So today I came home from work, go to hang up my coat, and what did I find? A bouquet of flowers from the downstairs office thanking us for being dream tenants who always pay rent on time. No. I found a cold spot by the bedroom door. The air is of an acceptable but not ideal temperature throughout our apartment. But by the door to our bedroom, there's a cold spot. This indicates the presence of a spiritual entity, and I do not pay $1,800 a month to be haunted in my own home. Unacceptable. I demand this be dealt with at once. At once. March 7th. Thank you for fixing the stove, but I did not appreciate how Jose made me feel stupid for not knowing about the pilot light feature. I expect he'll be reprimanded appropriately. March 11th. Yesterday I had a run-in with Paul Schummerman from down the hall. He was very rude to me when I asked him to stop staring at us venomously whenever we see him. Do you know what he did? He continued to stare as if he wishes harm upon me. I demanded to know what will be done about Paul Schummerman. March 14th. So apparently it's not just Paul Schummerman who's bizarre and rude. Rosa Martinez, the elderly foreign woman with maybe 5 or 6 remaining teeth from floor 3, smiled at us in a very evil-looking way that I did not appreciate when I was getting our mail. I demand to know what will be done about Rosa Martinez. March 14th. I know I just submitted a request, but it's 10:45, and Patricia is unable to sleep because of her nightmares. She says she can see a black figure standing at the end of our bed with red eyes. Not okay. Was someone murdered in this unit? Answers. March 16th. It's unacceptable that on James Madison's birthday, we cannot get the heat to stay on. The temperature's at 40 degrees. Much too cold. Fix this. March 17th. Still too cold. And do you mind explaining why all the pictures of Patricia and myself in our hallway were smashed and broken on the ground? I'm calling an exorcist since you refuse to do so, and rent will be reduced by the cost of his services. March 19th. We brought in a local priest who says that, guess what? It's not a ghost, it's a demon. A demon infests my humble abode as I write this. Do you think this is an acceptable way to run an apartment? No, it is not. I asked what we can do about the situation, and he says we should leave immediately, because if we don't, the demon will latch onto us and follow us around. Well, I am not relocating this soon. I asked him to deal with it. He said he can't, that it's beyond his ability to fight, and we have to have the entire building fully blessed. He then scheduled a time tomorrow for he and several other priests, rabbis, and pastors to arrive and do a thorough blessing of this building. You'll be billed for this. March 19th. Once again, I cannot sleep. Patricia is sleepwalking yet again, except instead of walking down the hall or screaming while still asleep from the kitchen, she's crawling on the ceiling and shouting at me in a very deep voice while her head twists fully around like an owl. I told her to get down at once, and she said, "No, she is mine." Excuse me, demon, she is not. I have work in the morning, but what I do not have is patience for this nonsense. Oh, and when I told the demon to let us sleep, it said, F me. F me. I do not appreciate that kind of language, no sir. Then she began hissing and spitting steaming bile onto the bed and laughing maniacally. Oh, my blanket is ruined. I'm typing this on my laptop from the couch while she shouts blasphemies down from the hall. If these priests do not fix this issue, we'll be reporting you for this mess. March 20th. Why are the lights off on floor 2? And where are the priests? All I see are more tenants pointing in unison down the stairs while staring at me like they're in a trance. It smells like rotting corpses and old food down here. Maybe old lasagna. This was not the case when I left for work this morning, although, to be fair, I simply walked down the stairs and did not venture down this hallway. I also did not notice the arrows painted in blood pointing downstairs. I assume those were put up while I was at work. March 20th. Where's the front door? I'm on floor 1 and the front door is missing. I just used it. Instead, there's just a swirling vortex of impenetrable blackness with blood coming out of it and staining the nice carpet. I expect this will be fixed as I have work tomorrow, and I need to be there early so I can prepare for a presentation on sales reports from quarter 1. Quarter 1. March 20th. I've now reached the door to the basement. Why is the word "come" scratched repeatedly into the wood here? Unsightly. March 20th. I'm at the top of the basement stairs. Did you know there are demonic voices whispering to people down here, saying to come downstairs with us, join us, join us, join us, over and over again? Why do they feel the need to repeat themselves? This is inefficient. March 20th. The voices are now saying that the gospel is a lie, but I said nothing about the first 4 books of the New Testament. This is an irrelevant red herring, and I demand we replace these demons with ones that can at least stay on topic. I'm here for my wife, not to debate the minutiae of Judeo-Christian theology with malevolent spiritual entities who, if I'm being perfectly honest, cannot be trusted on the matter because they clearly have a vested interest in me feeling one way or another as far as this subject is concerned, and are thus not being objective. If this keeps up, then I'll be taking my laundry to the laundromat down on Block and Charter for the foreseeable future, and you'll lose out on my business in that department. March 20th. Well, I now see where the priests have gone. Their bones are scattered across the basement and their collective blood is swirling in a vortex around what appears to be a portal to hell in the center of the basement, around which all the tenants of the ground floor are seated and worshipping. I believe I said very clearly that I did not want hell portals in my place of residence, and no one seemed to indicate this would be a problem when I signed the lease. If I'm ever to use these washing and drying machines again, I expect the gateway to Hades to be closed, and the place to be cleaned thoroughly before I do so. The smell is terrible, and I also demand that the glowing fiery pentagram in the floor beneath the portal be doused and cleaned off. It's detrimental to what little decor there is in this basement. March 20th. Well, all the tenants now see me, but as of this typing, have yet to respond to my demands to see my wife. They're simply staring at me, and I'm sorry, where are their eyes? Are eyes not fashionable anymore? How can they see me if they have no eyes? This is impossible. I demand they cease at once. They have no respect for the rules of either this apartment or physics itself. This day is ruined. March 20th. My wife, who is quite unkempt and whose hair appears to be unwashed and who looks like she is possessed with Satan, unacceptable, has joined the group as they speak to me in unison. I'm sorry. When was there a group practice for this performance, and why was I not invited? It is quite rude to exclude members of your own apartment from such group activities as theatre and Latin classes, apparently, and also I assume this strange deep voice they are singing belongs to the towering horned beast that has stepped through the portal and is pointing a clawed finger at me and approaching me slowly in an aggressive manner that I do not appreciate. Who is he? Does he pay rent? Do you just let anyone enter this building even if they don't pay rent? And if so, then I demand hereby, henceforth and at once, by the power vested in me as a lawful citizen and as a resident of this apartment, who is not nor ever has been delinquent on the payment of rent, nor any other agreed upon expensive, that...
A 400-year-old message in a bottle is addressed to me. Last year, my wife Janice and I were walking on the beach near our house. We'd been married almost 20 years and still hold hands wherever we go. So my first awareness of the bottle was when she started racing ahead and dragging me across the sand. "Hey Matt, look at the size of that shell," she said, simultaneously blocking my view of it as she ran ahead. "Oh wait, is that what I think it is?" "Probably, assuming you think it's a piece of trash." Janice let go of my hand to drop to her knees, allowing her skirt to pull around her on the sand. "It's not. It's a treasure. It's probably some homeless man's piss pot," I said. Anyone who's been married knows exactly what look she gave me. Sort of a, "I've known you long enough that I don't have to pretend you're funny anymore" kind of look. It really was a beautiful bottle though. Despite the erosion and clinging barnacles, countless years had stained its surface. It seemed to be made of some type of ceramic, and the fat base was surrounded in intricate geometrical designs. A leering face was carved into the neck, and a moldy cork with a pungent smell was wedged into the top. Janice wasted no time in trying to pry it open with her nails. "It looks like something that might have been on an old ship," she said, grunting with an effort like an offended farm animal. "How can you not be excited like this?" I shrugged, looking out to sea. I like to save all my excitement for the big things, like weekends and pizza nights. Speaking of... But she had opened it now. She turned it over to shake the contents out onto her outstretched palm. I expected a rush of water and nothing else, but the thin rolled parchment which slipped out was immaculately preserved. Janice unrolled it and studied the page. The wonder in her face gave way to amusement, then incredulity, her brow continuing to furrow into a bitter anger. "Well, don't leave me hanging. What's it about?" I asked. "I don't know. Ask your girlfriend." She shoved it against my chest and turned to stomp back towards our house without another word. Bewildered, I opened the letter and read, "Dear Matthew Davis, I miss you. I need you. How much longer will you make me wait? If your love endures as mine has done, what keeps you away from me?" "Janice? Honey?" I called, unable to tear my eyes away from the note. The paper, the bottle, even the smooth, archaic penmanship, all seemed ancient and untampered with. So what were the chances that it would be addressed to someone else with my name? My wife was already gone though. She didn't talk to me until late that night when I finally got frustrated enough to snap at her. It was either coincidental or a practical joke played on me, neither of which were my fault. She wasn't convinced, but at least she opened up about her fear that I was cheating on her. She thought that someone had hid the note near my house where I would find it as a romantic gesture. Eventually she came around, but it was an uneasy piece at best. And it got harder from there. There was another bottle almost every morning, wedged into the sand at the high tide line as though it had washed up overnight. Sometimes my wife will find them, other times I would. I posted pictures online of a few of the bottles, and the closest match I was able to find were potions used by 17th century alchemists. That seemed like an important clue to me, but all my wife was ever focused on were the notes. "The ocean's end, though we do not see it. The summers fade, though the sun seems unassailable in the sky. Only our love will never grow old. I will not give up on you, Matt." Another one. "How long has it been since we've made love? Do you still remember what it felt like to be with me?" Janice did all her best to play it off as a joke, but I could tell that it was getting to her. She kept making excuses to spend more time alone, and when I pressed her about it to talk about her jealousy, she'd only treat it like an accusation and get defensive. We'd start fights over nothing, until by the end of the night we were screaming at each other, and the next morning not even remember why. One night, all it took was me coming home late from work, and she was yelling before I even opened the car door. I couldn't take it anymore. I just slammed the car into reverse and left without a word, driving down to the beach to be alone. All the bottles were arriving within about 100-yard stretch, so I resolved to spend the whole night there until I caught whoever was really leaving them. Despite living within a walking distance of the ocean, I'd never spent any time there after the sun went down. It's amazing how alien and familiar a place can feel when the night closes in. The gentle rhythm of the waves seemed less innocent somehow, like I was listening to some colossal creature slowly breathing beside me. The reflection of the moon cast strange shapes into the water, and the cresting of each black wave seemed like it was being distorted by unseen creatures just below the surface. I maintained my silent vigil until just after midnight, when the moon was masked by a thick layer of clouds and my phone had run out of battery, and it was so dark that I don't think I could have seen someone drop the bottle 10 feet away. It would have been completely black if it weren't for the reflection in the ocean. I was getting ready to give up, or at least go back to the car and look for a flashlight, when a thought occurred to me. If the moon was completely obscured, how was the light still reflecting from the water? The longer I stared, the more sure I was the light wasn't reflecting at all. The soft luminescence was coming from below the waves. I raced back to my car to check for the light, but didn't find one. There was a snorkel mask in the trunk though, so I took that instead and returned to the beach. I stripped to my underwear and took a step in. The water was ice around my ankles, and I almost turned around. But the light was even stronger now, and I was drawn like a moth to the flame. By the time the water reached my knees, my feet were so numb that I couldn't even feel them. The light was moving too, twisting and dancing like a living thing. 1 second drawing close, the next leading me out a little deeper. Deep breath before the plunge, and I flung myself into the oncoming waves. The cold water closed over my head, but the thrill of discovery made me feel like liquid energy washing over my body. The light was coming from a woman, shining out through her translucent skin. She was gracefully twirling through the air, her slightest movements propelling her more easily than a practiced stroke. At first, she looked like she was swimming, but as I drew closer, it became apparent that all of the movements were wrong. Her elbows and knees moved in unnatural, double-jointed arcs. Her neck appeared to have no bones at all, and it turned fluidly to track me independently of her turning body. In her right hand she carried a bottle, just like the kind that had washed up on the shore. If my mouth hadn't been full of water, I might have screamed. I also might have said, "Hello, Janice," and she might have said, "I've been waiting for you." I don't know how long I followed her for. She let me get almost close enough to touch her before drifting back just out of reach. I was mesmerized by the light and couldn't resist trying to get a better look. If it weren't for the eldritch radiance and strange movements, I could have sworn it was Janice. And I thought if I could only get a little closer, just enough to catch her, then I'd know for sure. I was getting tired though, and stretching for the ground and feeling nothing, I suddenly realized how deep I had actually swam. I surged for the surface in a panic. The lights of houses on the shore were far away that they looked like stars. I spun helplessly in place, trying to get a bearing of where I was, when a hand grabbed my ankle. She didn't try to yank me down. The caress was gentle. But as soon as I tried to pull away, her grip tightened. I felt her fingers climbing my leg. The instant pressure, building like a constricting snake, slowly strangling its prey. I tried to start swimming back towards the shore, but the more I fought against her, the harder that she pulled. A moment later I was underwater again, bending double to vainly try and pry her hands off my fingers. Water was flowing into my nose and mouth at this point, the bitter salt igniting my throat and flooding me with waves of fresh panic. The more I panicked, the harder I fought, and the harder I fought, the deeper I was dragged. The last thing I remember was Janice wrapping her whole body around me, her limbs and spine completely encompassing me, as though she had no bones at all. I remember the icy water giving way to numbness, and then the suffocating pressure giving way to oblivion. It was early morning when I awoke on the beach. There was a bottle still clutched in my hands. "Can you forgive me?" it read. "I forgive you. As long as you visit me every year, I can wait a little longer for you to be mine again." Even when I went home, it didn't feel like home anymore. I found Janice's body lying in bed, with nothing but an empty bottle of Jack Daniels and 2 empty containers of sleeping pills. I was sick of notes, but there was one left for me to read on the night table. "I saw you with her in the water, and I'll never forgive you." It's been a year since my wife died. Maybe when I go back down to the water to visit her again, she'll finally understand. It's only her that I've ever loved.
So, yeah, I don't do drugs anymore. I mean, I was never a heavy addict or anything. Never did heroin or meth. Tried crack cocaine once. That was, yeah, but I was only sober for 8 months between that and when Eddie, an old buddy of mine, introduced me to something called K3. Against my better judgment, I took him up on the offer. "You heard of K2, bro?" he said. He was already high. "Spice. Yeah. Synthetic weed. Well, listen, man." I blinked. I looked at our mutual friend, Todd, then back at Ed. "Listen, what?" "What?" "You said, well, listen, man, and then you spaced out." "Oh, what were we talking about?" "K3. "Oh, right. You heard of K2? "Yeah, I just said that." He leaned in close. "Well, listen, man, this shit is like K2 and then some. Hence the name K4. "I thought you said it was K3. Todd stepped in. "Okay, ignore him. He's gone. This isn't synthetic anything, Kev. It's something new." "Then why did he call it K4? "K3. "Then why did he call it K3? "He calls it that because the high reminds him of being in space or something. And this shit is like another level. Oh, and it ain't cannabinoid nothing." I shifted in my seat. "Okay, I mean, you remember what happened last year, yeah?" Yeah. No, I got you. Listen, though. I've done this shit 4 times already. Haven't had one bad trip yet. First trip, I was just like, high off my ass. Nothing made sense. Second trip, I was like an astronaut, bro. I think I saw what exists outside the universe. Okay, what exists outside the universe? I said I saw it. Not that I remember it, but it was wild. I was warming up to the idea. How long does the high last? Depends on the hit and the quality. He held up a small bag of pills. And you know me, man. I only get the best. Muffin, his dog, growled from the other side of the room. "Muffin, hey, down, girl. Is she okay?" "She's fine, dude," he said. "She's fine, dude," echoed Eddie. Then he started laughing. "Is he on the stuff right now?" "I took it right before you got here. I wanted someone to be sober enough to explain it to you." "Thanks." "Thank yourself, person, you blithering snarch," Eddie said. Then he resumed laughing. "Thanks, Ed." Todd popped his pill in his mouth. I did the same. After a moment he said, "How are you feeling?" "Me? Fine. How long does it take to kick in?" He smiled. I should be feeling it momentarily, my dude. Muffin started growling again. Todd clapped once. Muffin, shush girl, come on. I looked at her. She was standing in her crate, baring teeth. The hair on her back stood on end. I don't think she's okay, man. She's fine. Hey, Ed, you good? I looked. Eddie was face down in the cushions of the couch. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was shivering. I said, "Are we going to get cold or something?" "Well, I usually don't," Todd said. "Every hit's different, and every person's different. All I know is it's fucking fun." Okay. Well, Ed didn't look like he was having much fun. "He doesn't look like he's having much fun," I said. "Yeah, well, you know how your friends can be, sweetie," said my mom. "Yeah, I know, Mom." "What?" I said, "I know, Mom." "I'm not your mother," said Pastor Lewis. "Oh," I said. "Sorry." He leaned in from where Todd had been. He looked concerned, disappointed. Had his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped between them. "Kip, you really shouldn't be doing this." "I know. Especially after what happened last year. What were you thinking?" "Well, I thought I could handle it, I guess." I stared at the floor. The way the colors on the carpet swirled in and out was always so mesmerizing. "It's going to be a bad trip, you know." I looked up. Pastor Lewis had on that old evil smile he always had. Or did he? I furrowed my brow. "What?" "It's going to be a bad trip," he said again in a deeper voice. Todd said all the trips he'd had were fun. That doesn't mean it's impossible to have a bad one. "Oh, Pastor Lewis doesn't sound like that." "Man, who the fuck is Pastor Lewis?" said Pastor Lewis in Todd's voice. I blinked. Todd was sitting there, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. I cleared my throat, but couldn't feel it. "Oh, my old pastor from back in the day," I said. Muffin barked from her kennel. It was a deafening, alien-sounding bark. Gravelly, dark. I looked over at her. She looked at me. She barked again, but this time didn't open her snout to do so. "Whoa," I said. "What?" said Todd. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. "Oh, cool how your dog can bark without moving her mouth. Can you sit down? You're weirding me out." "Yeah, sorry," Pastor Lewis said, before coming down and becoming Todd. And then Todd said, laughing hysterically, "I am sitting, man." He was indeed sitting. I looked up. Nobody on the ceiling and no indication that anyone had been there. He was doubled over with laughter, howling, aching laughs. He held his stomach. "Is it that funny?" "It ain't that," Todd said. "The spiders in your ears are singing." I smiled. "Oh yeah? What are they singing?" Todd couldn't stop laughing enough to respond, but he didn't need to. I could hear it too. "Dude," I said, "it's a song from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs." Todd laughed even harder. "Man, what? You spelled it wrong, my dude." "What?" "Go back. You spelled dwarfs wrong. It should be dwarves, not dwarves. What the fuck is a dwarf?" I scrolled up. There it was. Dwarves. That's weird. "That's weird," I said. Todd was still laughing, far harder and longer than the situation warranted. "How am I seeing words I spoke?" I asked. I grabbed the R in the dwarves so I could rearrange the word, but the R slapped me just as Muffin barked again. Bark smack. Just like that. A single bark. Sounded like Satan. I sat back down. "Easy there, dwarves," I said. "I'll spell it right next time, damn." "Make sure you do," said Muffin. One by one, the letters comprising the word dwarves headed out the kitchen window. "Dude," I said. "Todd, the letters are escaping. Stop the letters. Stop the letters." "I can't hear you, bro," said Todd in Pastor Lewis's voice, or Pastor Lewis in Todd's voice. Who were they again? Fuck, whoever it was said, "Come downstairs." "I am downstairs," I said, before stubbing my toe on his bedroom dresser. I took a step back. I was in his bedroom upstairs. The place was a wreck. Wait, how did I... "Come downstairs," said Muffin demonically. I couldn't see her, but somehow I just knew she was standing at the bottom of the stairs, on two legs, with her head upside down. You know when you just know a dog would look like that. Yeah, it was one of those times. "That's okay," I said. "I like it up here." He pulled one of his dresser drawers out, dumped out all his underwear and condoms, and put it on my head for protection. "No way you're getting me now, you bitch." I sat down on his bed, but his bed was on the other end of the room. "Oh," I said, sitting on his floor. "It hurt my ass." "Go downstairs," said Muffin from so close behind me she must have been inside my head. "Get out of my head," I said. "The power of the dresser drawer compels you." He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. "Hey!" He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. "Stop it!" He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. "Stop repeating that sentence." "What sentence?" said Todd. He was in his room, at least I think he was. "I don't know, man." I blinked again. He wasn't there. I could hear him laughing downstairs hysterically. "Holy shit," I could hear myself say. I sounded distant, underwater. I'm not in control right now. I started crawling towards the hallway, and he was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his... I shoved the sentence aside. The letters crashed into the wall and melted. I kept crawling, but now my hands were getting stuck in the quicksand. "Shit," I said. "Here we go." I made it to the door, but the dresser drawer in my head was too wide. I turned it the other way, the only possible solution to that problem, and went for the stairs. Downstairs, Eddie, up and about yet again, was approaching Muffin's kennel, bent over, walking unnaturally, wide-eyed, mouth open, out of his mind. Muffin was howling and barking hysterically, but also silently. "That's weird," I said. "It's gonna be a bad trip," said Pastor Lewis. "You already said that, Pastor Lewis. I'm asking why I can't hear Muffin bark." "It's gonna be a bad trip," he said again. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. "Why is everything repeating?" I asked aloud. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. "Why is everything repeating?" I asked aloud. "Don't drink water. Water, bro, said Todd. He handed me, and I tried to drink it upside down. The water spilled into the swirling vortex that was his floor. "Oh man," I said. "I lost the water." "Where did you have it last, sweetie?" said Mom. I looked at the empty glass. "I can't remember. Hey, Roy Rogers, what did I do with my water, man? Did I eat it?" Roy Rogers didn't respond. He was too busy floating on an upside-down chair that was attached to the ceiling. "Snarch," said his chair. Roy Rogers, who was also my Uncle Mo, tipped his hat. "Oh, let me know if you find it," I said. "I could have sworn I had it." Bark, 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 bark. "Oh, it's gonna be a bad trip, you know." "Why am I just hearing Muffin barking? That was like an hour ago." I looked over. Eddie had picked up a kennel, with her still inside, and was holding it above his head. She was consumed in absolute and utter panic, and he was trying to eat the entire crate. He unhinged his jaw to fit it inside, revealing exactly 14,543 razor-sharp teeth the size of railroad spikes. Bark, 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 bark. "Ed, stop," I heard myself say. I said. I squeezed my eyes shut and shook my head. "Ed, stop," I heard myself say. "Why?" His face was static, like when you turn your TV to a channel you don't own. Ed, put her down. And get that static off your face. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. What? Eddie said. He dropped the kennel. Muffin yelped. I don't know, man, I said. Your face is all staticky, like when you turn your TV to a channel you don't own. My face is static, Eddie said through the static. He started clawing at it. And who's clawing on the ceiling, looking down at you in a way that should have broken his neck? That seemed out of place. I heard the words but didn't see them coming from Eddie's mouth. In fact, Eddie wasn't even standing there anymore. He was in the kitchen getting a knife. Shit. It's gonna be a bad trip, you know. Shut up, Pastor Lewis. I know that now. Eddie started swiping the knife in front of his face. Get off me, Static, he said. Get off me, Static. I put the knife down. Ed, stand up. Wait, no. I stood up. Eddie knifed, putting the SED down. Oh, damn it. I stood up. Ed, put the knife down. There we go. It's gonna be a bad trip, you know. I turned around. Pastor Lewis was at the top of the stairs, but it wasn't Pastor Lewis. It was a perfectly black figure. Pastor Lewis, black's slimming on you. Come upstairs, said the figure. It didn't sound like Pastor Lewis anymore, but it did sound like static, almost as if the static had formed itself into words. I can't. I have to save my friend from the static knife. Come upstairs, said the figure. Come upstairs, come upstairs, come upstairs, come upstairs, come upstairs, come upstairs, stairs, ceilings. He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Neck, knock. Bark. Get off me, static. Who the fuck is Pastor Lewis? He was crawling on the ceiling, looking down at me in a way that should have broken his neck. Come upstairs, dwarves. Sweetie, it's gonna be a bad trip, you know. No. I was falling, I realized. Falling. And it was hot. Wherever this endless tunnel was, it was hot and dark. Well, that's a bad combination usually, isn't it? I haven't been in many dark and hot places, but having experienced it, I can say I'd much rather be in bright, cool places. Help me, I said. I felt asphalt. Help me, I'm falling. Now I saw lights coming on from the side of the pit. Come upstairs, said a single voice from behind me that was also Todd, Pastor Lewis, Eddie, and my mother at once. This is a bad trip, Kevin, the voice continued. It's real and you know that. What you thought was real was the trip. Time, space, those are the illusions. This is what exists behind the veil. This is the nothingness that exists outside the universe. This is the nothingness that awaits you at the end. No! Falling. Getting him to his feet. Come upstairs and get that thing off his head. Come upstairs. Join the static. Static. Bark. You okay? I blinked. Hey, kid, said the officer. You okay? I looked around. I was lying in the street. Concerned neighbors. Police cars everywhere. Most were in front of Eddie's house. Muffin whimpered in the crate next to me. What happened? Well, you're out here screaming, I'm falling. No. With a dog kennel, a dresser drawer on your head, and no shoes. I was hoping you'd tell me. I think I was saving Muffin, I said. Who's Muffin? The dog? Yeah. Saving her from what? My friend was going to kill her, I think. Then he tried to cut his face off because it was all static. Holy shit. My now sober brain processed unsober words. Holy shit, that stuff was insane. Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment, dumbass. You're lucky you didn't jump off the roof. Can you stand? The officer helped me to my feet. I stumbled towards his car. Wait, I said. What happened to, Todd, Eddie? Are they okay? He looked at me. No, kid, they're not okay. This is why you don't fuck with this stuff. Now we have to clean up what's left. Sit there. He went off to talk to the other officers and the paramedics. Shit. Paramedics? 2 gurneys? An ambulance? I came to a full 36 hours later in my own bed. As I later found out, Eddie did succeed in getting the static off of his face, along with the rest of his face. And the last I heard of Todd, he was in a straitjacket. Muffin was given to the shelter, and then to another family. So there's some good news, at least. As for myself, I was told the effects might never wear off. I didn't believe them at first. I mean, who would? And how do you even process that kind of news? Fuck, I don't know. All I know is that the black figure is still standing at the end of my hallway, asking me to join it. I can still hear static.
Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories. It was an absolute pleasure to work with Dr. Creepin on these stories. He is brilliant. His voice is amazing, as you've obviously heard by now. And in the exceptionally rare case that you haven't already heard of his work or himself, you can find a link to his channel on screen shortly and in the description. He produces some amazing content, and, well, I'm sure you'll like it as much as I do. I'd like to also extend a huge thanks to my lovely patrons and members whose names can be seen on screen for all your continued support. If you'd like to support the channel, you can find a link where you think you can find a link. Just follow it and, do what you want to do. Thanks, guys. But for now, I'm going to sign off. Link to Dr. Creepin is on screen now. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.